Hi, it's Tim again, and welcome back to the Pioneer SX950 vintage receiver rebuild project. And this is part 6, if I am getting my numbers correct here. And what we're going to attempt today to do is to rebuild the power supply board. So that's the only remaining board I need to do on the bottom side of the receiver, and then we'll flip the receiver over and start with the top side boards. The amp board here is kind of both, but anyway, we'll get to that. So what we're going to swap out today is 12 electrolytic capacitors, all marked here. Usually I put a little arrow on them to mark the front face of the unit that I'm working on, just as an orientation check, just to make sure I get all the polarities correct on the capacitors. And then we also have another 10 transistors that we have to swap out. So this is going to be a longer one, and it's a important board, so this is one I can't botch up, otherwise I could toast the receiver. Not that I will, hopefully. So without further ado, we'll kick into time-lapse photography, and then I'll go through any issues. What I'm going to have to do is unscrew or unclip the board, trying to keep all of the wiring intact, because this has all got fancy twisted wiring on the wiring posts here. So what we'll do is we'll separate the board from the receiver from the clips, and then hopefully have enough room to move out some of these wires in order to get to the bottom side of the board, so I can decouple all of the components that we need to do. So let's get started. Well, I thought I would jump in here and just talk about the electrolytic capacitor upgrade here on the power supply board. I still yet have to do the transistors, and but I wanted to just mention that there's a couple of little tricks on this one. One is that these two large capacitors here, I think they were the 470 microfarad ones. They actually are a 3-pin, so I'm sitting there tugging a little bit on one of them and realized, holy crap, there's a third pin here. So just got to be careful with that, because you don't want to pull too hard and wreck your board or anything. Good thing I noticed that. And the one pin is just a guide pin on these old caps. The replacement pins are just or the replacement caps just have the standard 2 polarized terminals on them. And so you just ignore the guide pin or whatever. The other thing is they used quite a bit of sticky glue to glue the heavier, larger capacitors onto the PCB, and you know, you get them desoldered, decoupled. You think that they're you know, going to flip free, and then you have to use quite a bit of force, and you got to be really careful because you don't want to crack the board or crack any of your traces. So you have to just be very patient and just slowly work them out. Otherwise, you can actually damage your PCB. So pretty straightforward. You just have to look at some of the values. Some of the capacitors I had weren't actually in the Audio Karma list. They were actually out of production, so I had to use substitutes. And so I went with higher voltage capacitors, just slightly higher voltage. So you just got to make sure you're getting the right voltages for whatever capacitors you're swapping. There's a lot of 47 microfarads, and you just got to make sure you're not using undervolt ones for the ones that you're swapping out. So other than that, went very well. It takes a while. You got to be patient. And next we're going to work on the transistors. I'm going to do that slowly and carefully, because sometimes the emitter and base and the other one are actually sometimes backwards on the replacements. So yeah. Just be very careful with doing your swap outs and making sure you're getting all your polarized components the right polarity, and also the transistors are properly oriented. So back to time lapse. Well, I got to admit I'm a little bit stymied. So I've come to the end of assembling the power supply board, and all of a sudden now the relay over here is not tripping. Doing the power supply board. So I took out all the electrolytic capacitors, replaced them with if-in-kind spec'd out electrolytic capacitors, and then I moved on and did all of the transistors. And then of course I reassembled everything, plugged it in, and nothing. Now all of a sudden the relay is not tripping. I've got it unplugged so I can point things out here. So then I thought, okay, maybe I botched something on the power supply. That's, you know, it's could happen. Very easy to do. Orienting either a capacitor, a polarized capacitor incorrectly, or it could have been using a PNP or NPN filter or transistor and plugging it in the wrong spot or whatever. But I was pretty careful in making sure I segregated out all the correct transistors. So thinking that, you know, I double checked all my work, went through all of the transistors, all the capacitors, everything is oriented correctly, and they're the ones that were spec'd out for doing this upgrade. And so then I said, well, I'm going to go through and make sure that all the output voltages as outlined on this diagram here, which is the power supply assembly AWR 101. And then on the side here you see pins 1 through, they're all out of order here, but up through pin 15. And it tells you what the voltages should be. And as you can see in the blue writing off to the sides, everything checks out. So all the voltages coming off of this power supply are correct. So I can only assume that I assembled it correctly. And the only change is, of course, I put all new components in this board, and now the relay is not firing. So then I went back to the protection board, of course. I did have this shunt diode there that was explained to me that it would be better if it was put in there. So I put the diode in, then thinking maybe that's the incorrect one, because in the audio karma it says to go between pins 9 and 10, but in a couple of online YouTube accounts of people reassembling the 850 and the 950, it goes between 9 and 11, with the negative side being on the 11 pin. So everything checks out voltage-wise up to pin 12, I believe, which has nothing on it. And then that feeds back off this power supply, which is fed from the transformer. Anyway, and it should be according to this schematic that I have somewhere here. There we go. Pin 11, sorry, it's pin 11. It should have 36.5 volts on it, but it has nothing. And at one point I did get 27.46 volts, but right now I'm getting nothing. So anyway, that's where I'm at. All right. I went ahead and posted the previous video about the problems I was having. And what I ended up finding out was that that little guy right there, which is a zener diode, had popped on me. And basically what it was from was a loose wire, which was from pin 10 on the protection board to pin 10 on the power supply board. It had actually come loose and had shorted out on the leg of a transistor, which fed back and popped it. I checked all the transistors and they were all okay, so they survived that. And so what I ended up doing was I substituted a zener diode that I had in one of my from a previous Pioneer project that I had, and it's a slightly elevated voltage, 14 volt instead of 13 volt, and read up online on an SX950 upgrade thread that it was kind of similar. It was the I think it's WZ130, and the WZ140, there was a substitute, and it actually still worked for that one. So all of my voltages across these pins here on the power supply are now good. I do have elevated voltages on 2 and 3. Should be reading 5.4 volts, and I'm getting about 6.7, 6.8 volts on those. And that's probably because we've considerably updated or upgraded the capacitors, all new transistors, and of course the new zener diode. So anyway, it solved my problem. So when I powered on, if you'll want to plug it back in here, and we'll power it back on, and you should hear the relay trip off in about 4 or 5 seconds, and that's the problem that had eluded me. So I think it solved my issue. So let's try this. And there you go. There's the relay popped, and now we've got voltages across the entire receiver. So I'll turn it back off and go in and try and sound check now, and hopefully it'll pan out. So more to follow. All right, I got the receiver flipped upside right, and now is the test to see how it sounds. And of course, everything was clicking on properly when I had it up on its side, and or upside down actually. And I was looking at the boards and everything. So what I've done is I couldn't find my digital player, so I've got my one of my Walkmans here plugged into auxiliary, and basically you can't see the panel. I've got it downstairs so it doesn't get all dinged up and everything while I'm doing all of this. So speaker A on, auxiliary here, everything else is flat, including your bass and treble control. That's the tone control activation there. And yeah, balance control right here, and everything's plugged in over here to my Dynaco speakers, which I've disconnected from my homemade Dynaco system here, updated Dynaco system. So what we'll do is we'll power it on, and a few seconds later you should hear the relay kick in if all is good, and let's give it a whirl. And there you go, relay kicks in, nice and good. And what we'll do is I'll push play on my cassette deck. Oh, and there we go, I had the volume up already a little bit. There you go. And if I do my balance cool, both channels are working. I don't want to trip off any things, but I did give it a good little sound check before I started recording here, just to make sure. As usual, or as per the original condition, I've only got 2 lights working right now behind. That's why it's kind of dull in the front. That's going to be the last thing I do, is all the I've got a full light kit to LED light kit to make this thing nice and bright again. And the next targeted board will probably be the tuner board, and then finally I'll jump into the amp board. After that, of course, I'll have to do bias settings and all that sort of stuff using the trimmer pots, and got a procedure for that. So the radio is working fine, both AM and FM. And yeah, so all of the controls here have been completely cleaned out. All of the boards are now complete on the bottom side of the receiver. So we had the phono board, the protection circuit board, flat amp board, the controls board, and then the latest one is the power supply, which took me a little bit, but we got her working, and all the voltages are really good. So right across all the pins 1 to I think it's 15 on that board. So very happy with the outcome, and more will follow. So if any questions, drop me a line, and we'll try and get some responses to you. Oh yeah, the issue that I had with the power supply was a zener diode, and I think I described that in the previous video. So sorted that all out, and now we've got a nice sounding receiver. So thank you for watching.